Welcome to Something More with Chris Boyd. Chris Boyd is a certified financial planner practitioner and senior vice president and financial advisor at Wealth Enhancement Group, one of the nation's largest registered investment advisors. We call it Something More because we'd like to talk not only about those important dollar and cents issues, but also the quality of life issues that make the money matters matter. Here he is, your fulfillment facilitator, your partner in prosperity, advising clients on Cape Cod and across the country. Here's your host, J. Christopher Boyd.
Welcome. I'm Chris Boyd. I'm here with Russ Ball. You're listening to Something More. Glad to have you with us. We are both of the AMR team at Wealth Enhancement, and our topic today is integrated planning. So, what comes up a lot is tax questions lately, Russ. I think this is something that most people expect their financial counsel, their financial advisor to be thinking about and to be helping them with, but oftentimes that is not really the case.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people think that their CPA might be the one to help them out on sort of like how to optimize tax strategy, tax planning. But I mean, we've heard recently and over probably you over the years, and just that might not be what everyone's getting. CPAs have a lot to do. They have a lot of tax prep and tax filing to do. So it's not always an individual kind of decision. They don't necessarily look at the whole picture. Mm-hmm. So I think a lot of people do come to us looking for how does the tax part of the puzzle fit together with everything else?
It's funny when you mentioned that, the whole idea of with tax preparers, CPAs, oftentimes they're really focused on the moment, trying to get that tax return completed and all that's in that. Oftentimes you don't get the opportunity to sit down and really have some strategy conversation. Beyond that, different disciplines make different priorities. We find often that, tax advisors focus on the here and now, and we'll think about how do we plan for reducing this tax return this tax year, when oftentimes what we might be focused on is how do we think about taxes over the course of the financial plan, over the forecast, the lifetime. We've talked about tax diversification in other circumstances, but just to review that notion that it's really important for people to have not just all their eggs in one tax category, tax deferred 401k, IRA type money. They are benefited by having some money outside of that and, individual joint trust, taxable accounts. I say taxable because they earn interest or they have capital gains, but there's some tax implications from year to year as compared to a tax deferred where, we put money into an IRA or a 401k and that money grows. It goes in without any tax consequence. It reduces my income here and now potentially, but it ultimately grows into a larger number, all of which is subject to tax. So we're just deferring and pushing off that tax. Someday that tax is due. And then there's also tax-free kinds of categories. Most notably, we think about Roth category, Roth IRA, Roth 401k type accounts where the taxes are paid on the way in. I've had the income. I'm getting taxed on the income. I make my contribution. It doesn't have a tax event for the money going in, or it's just because I've already earned that income in effect. But it grows tax-free, no tax along the way. And when I take the money out, whatever it's grown into is post-tax. There's no tax implication. HSAs sometimes fit into that category perhaps as well. So that sounds pretty appealing. Maybe in some instances, 529 plans fit into that category. So there can be places where we can find really attractive tax treatment. So when we think about our planning, we want some tax diversification. That's really important. It's very common that people have a greater emphasis on the tax deferred category because they're pushing off the tax, trying to keep their taxes low in the here and now. And that can be a good strategy at times. However, when we look over a lifetime, a couple of things come to mind. One is, will your taxes be higher or lower in the future? And this, of course, is something nobody has a crystal ball. We don't know the answer for sure. Most people expect their income to be diminished, perhaps in retirement. And as much as that can be true, or certainly at times can be true, that's not always true. And what we often find is that because of significant tax deferred accumulated assets, we can get pushed into higher and higher tax brackets and tax consequences because of required distributions that happen later in life. And so sometimes there's real virtue to doing some tax planning as to when to take those funds. Now, let's come back to that one, Russ, and you might want to comment about that a little bit as you know that happens in the financial planning process. But before you do, I want to just say that there's also the issue that tax rates can change. And we have had the benefit of really low historically tax rates over the last few years. Seems we're in the, right when we record this right now, it's unknown. Seems likely that the tax bill is going to pass and extend the tax rates from the Tax Cut and Jobs Act of 2017, 18, somewhere around there. So that we're going to have this extended benefit of an opportunity with really lower taxes. It can make sense to do some tax planning over time because with the significant accumulation of national debt, it seems in all likelihood, eventually tax rates are going to be higher. And it might make sense for some people, depending on your tax bracket, the level of income and assets that you have. You may benefit from doing some tax planning where you think about when is the right time to take taxes, not just how to push them off.
Right. And when you have a financial plan and you can see the whole picture, we can set like longevity expectations and see when when retirement is. And there's usually a window in there between retirement and RMDs, not always, but sometimes, where it does make sense to think about converting some of those IRA assets to Roth assets. And within the financial planning process, we're able to go through and see that. Obviously, it does depend on your age and how long you expect to live, because if you're paying earlier, you're front loading that tax bill in a way, and you're gonna have savings later on in life. So you want to take that into consideration, but we can do that within the financial planning picture.
Yeah, the financial plan can the software we use and the process we go through can really be a great tool in evaluating what's the best, what's kind of optimal for how we think about the tax considerations. And we talked about our show today as integrated planning, and this is one element of that. Let me back up a little bit to think taxes is what's been coming up quite a bit, as you said, and it's a important part of the process. But when we think about planning with our clientele, we talk about the portfolio is where people tend to focus. We want to think about how should I be invested, right? And that may be the driver that brings someone in the door. But before you can really get a handle on how to think about how to invest, we need to think about the context of how soon will I need the money? What's happening in the plan? Is there going to be a lot of time that we have this money invested, or a relatively short period of time? How does the plan forecast? And when that means money in, money out, goals, objectives, income sources, assets, etc. How much is IRA? How much is not? So on. These aspects all put together can create a picture. And that can help us to think about how should we be structuring this portfolio around these particular circumstances. And that's the notion of this integrated planning. Now, one component of that may be an estate planning consideration. It may be the tax planning considerations. There can be a variety. Maybe it's protection, risk mitigation considerations. That could be insurance, could be other things. So, how do we think about these variables in context of one another, not just to push a product or to, hey, this is my favorite solution kind of an approach?
Or just trying to get the best returns possible.
It's not just about performance,
Right,
because it's what's left over, right?
Yeah.
The after tax implications. Is that what you're going with?
Well, that, but also just like, there are advisors out there who will try to get the riskiest products, and maybe your investments aren't in line with your risk tolerance, and we take all of that into consideration when coming up with a proposal.
So this can create opportunities for giving thought to strategy. One element of that can be thinking about issues like, when do I turn on my Social Security or not? That doesn't have to be the same time you retire. A lot of times people interchange those notions that they're going to have their Social Security start at the time they retire. Can, but it doesn't have to. And how that plays out, how that impacts your portfolio or your demands, or your this integrated planning, the tax considerations and so forth, is relevant. What we often find is that sometimes people retire where they have a period of a window of years where they have a reduced tax consequence because they have less income after stopping working. But within a few years, their Social Security is on and their required distributions have kicked in. And that can push them not only back into a high tax bracket like they had when they were working, sometimes it can even push them into a higher tax bracket. Add to that the possibility that tax brackets can rise. It's not just what we have today. Add to that, if you're a married couple, if one of you passes later in life, God willing, it's a long ways off, but when and if that happens, that pushes the survivor into higher tax bracket because a lot of that income now is on a single tax filer. So all of these variables can be reasons to be thinking about, how do we position our tax planning integrated with our financial planning, integrated with our investment planning, integrated with our estate planning, and so on. All of these variables are relevant to put into a comprehensive approach to the way we think about our planning.
Yeah. And one other piece that comes to mind is, like, it's not just a static representation of your financial plan. We are working with you through your milestones in life, and as things change, we can be a resource to assist in those difficult decisions as life goes on. And it's not like, all right, here's your financial plan, now you're done, see you in a few years.
Right.
We're working with you constantly, and it's a not
These
a static
important
environment. It's
decisions.
evolving over time.
And as these decisions come up, we love it when clients reach out and say, I'm thinking of, how does this affect my plan? It's a great way to think about how to navigate those decisions. Can I be gifting? I'd like to do some gifting. What's the consequence if I do this much versus that much? Well, we can plug that in and give some thought to that. For how long a period of time? If it's forever, what does that mean? Okay, I have essentially, therefore, this much higher spending in effect. And how does the plan forecast? Many times there's a lot of room for that. Other times we see where it can be really destructive to one's financial security. So it's really varies from one family to the next as to their resources and their income stream and so forth. But that's an example. We see a lot of times when families try to help their kids or um, their loved ones, where they say, how do we do this? We want to help in their difficult circumstance. And we've seen some instances where that can be problematic, and other instances where it can be a source of joy for the parent to see their wealth being used in a way that really helps their family, without it being adversely consequential. That's an example of trying to do some planning.
Another one, I thought it was like charitable giving. So, a lot of people do charitable giving throughout the year, and there are ways to achieve that, especially if you're over a certain age, over 70. But even if you're any stage of life, there are ways to do charitable gifting in a tax efficient manner that will, maximize your generosity, without having to pay as much taxes on it.
Yeah, let's dig into that just for a minute. I know you're talking about qualified charitable distributions as one example.
Mm-hmm.
70 and a half and older, if you have reached that age milestone, you have the opportunity to take money from your IRA and contribute it to a charity directly through this process, and avoid any income tax implications while giving it to a charitable entity that pays no income tax. Now, if you took that money out of the IRA and then turn around and give it to the charity, you might get a deduction, but you will have a higher tax implication than if you're giving it directly to the charitable entity through this qualified charitable distribution. Another way people oftentimes think about charitable giving, because that's only for people age 70 and a half and older, but if people have appreciated assets, most people, when they think about charitable giving, they just write a check. And as wonderful as that is for the charitable entity, it's not necessarily the best planning approach, because it leaves you with more tax implication. You're giving assets that you've already paid income tax consequence with. Why not, for example, give an appreciated asset that has maybe is hard to get rid of because it has a lot of taxes associated with it, and you could gift that, avoid the capital gains tax, even if you needed to replace the asset, which in many cases we're dealing with something that's outsized. It's a way to give it, and then the charity gets it at full value. You get the benefit of having given it at full value, but it avoids you from having a capital gains tax. Let's talk about that kind of a scenario, Russ. We've run into this a lot lately, where we have clients or prospective clients who have pretty dramatically appreciated assets of one type or another. And sometimes it can create a scenario where someone has a bloated exposure to a single company or to an industry. Maybe it's not just one stock, but oftentimes it's a single stock.
Yeah.
And it can be challenging, whether it's because they've had a portfolio for a buy and hold for a really long time, which has been a good experience, but leaves them maybe with more risk than they want as they get older, and perhaps feeling like they just have to hold it until they die, so there'll be a step up in basis.
Yeah.
And sometimes that can be a strategy, but there might be other ways to think about it. You want to talk a little bit about some of the notion of what does one do? There might be other possibilities.
Yeah, well, no one wants to get stuck with the huge capital gains, gain implication and the taxes you have to pay on those. So whether it's for diversifying out of a single position, or even unwinding a portfolio that's appreciated over the last 30 years or whatever it may be, we have methods that can help generate or help offset some of the gains in that portfolio through a variety of different tools and solutions.
So in essence, finding the right tool, in this case, the right investment approach, the strategy utilized. Some investment strategies are more sensitive to tax consequences than others. And finding one that is good at not only trying to perform, but trying to mitigate tax implications or reduce capital gains through the use of capital losses or whatever it might be, can really add value. When you think about the after-tax benefits, the after-tax performance, I mean, that's really what matters, isn't it? It's not just about the rate of return I get, it's how much I get to keep.
Yeah.
So some investment approaches are better than others in being mindful of the capital gains consequences and trying to navigate them. When it comes to our managed portfolios with the clients we work with, we try to think in terms of a tax budget. And so we try to live within that. So, because it's reality that things will change and we'll want to make some changes from time to time. And that requires some turnover. But that's something we pay attention to. And we do look for the opportunity to realize losses as well. And there are other times when there are strategists, portfolio management teams that we can utilize where they are designed with the possibility of structuring the portfolio in a way where they not only can get performances in line with an index, but they can capture more capital losses than other strategies. And that can allow us potentially opportunities in our integrated planning to be trying to allow someone who's been stuck in a portfolio that they might want to reduce exposure to embedded capital gains to now have the opportunity to offset some of those capital gains with some of the losses that they might find from an alternative strategy or with other assets.
Yeah, it's not only useful in those instances, it's also when, if you have an investment property that you're looking to sell, or a business that you've owned and run for years, and you're looking to sell, and there's going to be a significant capital gains hit on that because let's say you started a business yourself. That's a low cost,
no basis to speak of. Yeah.
And then, when you're selling that business or that property, whatever it may be, there are things that we can do with some time ahead to plan.
Yeah. The longer we have for a runway for planning, the more advantageous, the more we can mitigate that tax implication.
So that goes to show the integrated planning aspect is like the more we know about what's going on in your financial life, the more likely we are to be able to assist and help navigate those things. And like we were talking about, charitable giving, gifting, considering the sale of a property or business, these are all things that are valuable to know and part of your financial plan. It's not just the investments that we're managing. We're also looking at it all holistically.
So how does it achieve your ends? What's important to you? How do we help you make sure that you're not only financially secure, but living your best life, right? That's what it's ultimately about when it comes to the financial planning and giving you the tools and resources to find your purpose, which we talked about recently in a prior episode. Those are the kind of priorities we're trying to do. We want to help you make the most of the resources you have, not just in terms of a rate of return, but in terms of living well with the means you have. So if we can be a resource to you in thinking about your integrated planning, don't hesitate to reach out to us. Until next time, keep striving for something more.
Thank you for listening to Something More with Chris Boyd. Call us for help, whether it's for financial planning or portfolio management, insurance concerns, or those quality of life issues that make the money matters matter. Whatever's on your mind, visit us at somethingmorewithchrisboyd.com or call us toll free at 866-771-8901 or send us your questions to amr-info@wealthenhancement.com. You're listening to Something More with Chris Boyd Financial Talk Show. Wealth Enhancement Advisory Services and J. Christopher Boyd provide investment advice on an individual basis to clients only. Proper advice depends on a complete analysis of all facts and circumstances. The information given on this program is general financial comments and cannot be relied upon as pertaining to your specific situation. Wealth Enhancement Group cannot guarantee that using the information from this show will generate profits or ensure freedom from loss. Listeners should consult their own financial advisors or conduct their own due diligence before making any financial decisions.